Time for a big sip. Big sip time. Happy Friday night. Great to see you, everybody. Lost track of time there. Great to see you. Happy Friday. Happy cocktail night. This is our first not gallery night in a long time, and gallery night is next week. So I'm already getting the next wave of rugs. Please keep sending those images for gallery night next week. Tonight is a very special night, though. I'm going to say hello to everybody in just a minute. I'm just having it's been a wild day. Did you see? Did you see? Um, Gelato Girl, back east, orange cream. It really tastes like a creamsicle. Mm. I usually don't drink beer at cocktail night anymore, but it's that kind of a day, right? Robin, I'm saving this for a good time, for a good Friday night. So what a day. I have so many things to tell you, and I want to say hello to everybody who's logged on. It's going to be a great show. We are looking at the Rug Hooking Magazine book. Rug Hooking Magazine presents Hooking Fairy Tales by Robin Rennie. This really is one of my all-time favorite books. You won't believe how many images are in this book. We're not looking at all of them because that would be a huge spoiler alert. But this is an amazing book. This is an amazing book. This is my favorite book in a long time because I love fairy tales, and we did a fairy tale class not that long ago, designing like the storybook fairy tale. I think it was. This is just great. These are the rugs that the Promogown teaching. I don't think chapter is the right word. The teachers of Promogown, what's the word? I'm struggling for the word. They did this challenge and they completed this collection of rugs that are based on Gilded Age or classic, the golden age of fairy tale, the sort of 1860s to roughly 1920. Big window, right? It's not all gilded or golden or anything, but there's a lot of good illustrators in there. And yeah, they've picked out images from many different stories, some of them really like kind of unknown, or at least ones that I haven't heard of. Doesn't mean that they're unknown, does it? But did you get my messages? Okay, check your phone. Sorry. So yeah, we're going to be looking at that, diving in deep today. It's a lot. So we'll see how far we get. I think we're probably going to spill over to Monday. I also want to tell you a few other items. I was in Hartford again today, hanging more. We're not exactly there yet, but we're almost there, getting everything in order. It's a lot. There are 86 rugs there, and there's more coming. So it's a lot. The show is on Sunday. It's a big show. It is a beautiful show. I hope that everybody who is in this area is going to come join, see, visit, hug, look, photograph, post, blog, whatever, right? Whatever to keep things lively. It's in the 90s today, too. I'm not going to complain because it's a beautiful day, but it is warm. I've got the fan going over here, so hopefully that's some white noise and it's not too distracting. So that's coming up this weekend on Sunday. And on Monday, I'll probably be continuing the conversation on this. This is not one of our book giveaways because this is a 2023 book. So this is a book that I hope that you'll order because it really is. You will not be sorry. This is your bedtime book for the next 6 months, I think. It really is. It's incredible. There's a lot of information in here. Besides beautiful rugs, there's a lot of information about the illustrators and just unbelievable. That's happening. So that's happening on Sunday. At the show is at the in Hartford, Connecticut, at the Charter Oak Cultural Center. Go on their website. You don't need tickets apparently, but there's a band playing. Big opening for these rugs, 4 to 6 p.m. So, and right, if you have any questions, I am going a little bit crazy this weekend, but all the information should be on Charter Oak. I'm putting it up with Pierre Sylvain, who's one of our buddies. We went to look at his show this past December, right, when he had it in the same place. He's on the board of directors there. That's how we squeaked in at the last minute because there was an opening. So that's exciting. And you know what else is exciting? I was talking to Kathy Wright at Sauter Village yesterday. So some of you have been asking on the Facebook page, is Deanna, and I'm talking about myself in the third person, which is always creepy, is Deanna, does she have any signed books that I can get out to people? And it's tricky, isn't it? So I said I would like be signing book plates and mailing them to anybody who wants them so you can stick them into the cover of the books, because if you've ordered your book on Amazon, it's going to go to you and not to me, and it's tricky. But I will be at Sauter Village, and I will be doing a signing at Sauter Village this year. So I will be there for a pop-up vendor event at the beginning of the week, just a small one. I can't do a big one. I don't have the mojo anymore. Um, I know that sounds awful, doesn't it? That's not much of an inspiration, is it? But man, I am. Woo! Remember, I've got those two little kids because I had them both in my 40s. So I will be there for a pop-up kind of little show, selling some stuff that is uniquely ribbon candy hooking, and I'll be there for a book signing. And the books will be available that are signed. If you haven't ordered it on Amazon already, if you have, and you're going to Sauter, bring it so I can sign it and get some hugs, right? So we can do like many things at once. That's our chance. So I was going to go anyway, but now it's official. Now it's really official. So I'm doing those two things. We're projecting forward to next year too, with like a show and teaching and another book signing for the second book, all of that. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening right now. But if you are going to Sauter and you've been asking about how can I get my book signed, I will be there, and there will be an official signing for the first book. So, and the second one's not out yet because I haven't finished it. So that'll be fun, right? Oh, God. All right, let's see. Andrea, good to see you. Cheers, my dears. Tia Maria Matcha. Oh, that sounds so good. Tonight's tipple. I love the word tipple. It's so British. It's so quaint. It's so Miss Marple. I love it. How's John doing, Andrea? Is he doing well, too? Ryan, great to see you. Happy Friday, y'all. We're grilling and having gin daisies. Oh, gin daisies. That sounds potent. In the evening sunshine. Finished my latest punch piece today. Sounds fantastic. I can't wait to see it on gallery night, right? And Linda B, good to see you. You folks are living it up. That's it. Cheers, my dears. Kaz, great to see you. Happy Friday. Everyone in Wisconsin, it's 81 degrees here. That is nice, isn't it? That is nice, Jenna. Thank you for sneak peek of the rug show today. There will be a lot more, and I will be coming to you live next Wednesday. So Monday we'll probably be continuing this conversation because it's vast. And on Wednesday, I will be there live after the opening, but when it's quieted down, and we will look through everything in great detail. And we'll talk about the different rugs. Might have to be a couple of shows. We'll see how it goes. I have Raul's private number, and he opens the door for me there when it's not regular hours. It's better if I go when it's not regular hours because then we won't be interrupted 10 times, you know. So I'll do that on Wednesday. And I'll film live on Sunday. And I said to Pierre, like, I mean, you know, I'm used to talking like off the cuff. It's fine talking off the cuff. I've had a lifetime of experience embarrassing. There you go, embarrassing myself talking, ad-libbing and improv and all that stuff. So it's fine. But I said, will you be expecting me to say something, just so I'm not, because it's an event, right? It's festive. And he said, yeah. And I said, good to know. Good to know. Like, not that I'm going to, recite Ulysses, but it's nice to know so that I have a few things ready that might be eloquent a little bit. We'll see. So we're going to do some filming there too, but it is going to be jam-packed. We are expecting 100 to 150 people. So that's exciting. That's good news. But yeah, we'll do as much recording as we can there without being obnoxious. And then I'll be back there on Wednesday and we'll do a full blast show. At least one. Candace, great to see you. Good evening. Everything looks great. Yep, I still have more to do. Hold on just a minute. My curtain just fell over the fan, and that means death. Like, that actually means death. So hold on a second. I'm fooling with stuff. Fooling with stuff. Cha-cha. Yeah, well, I'm trying to. Yeah, no, this is making a big, like, hot air balloon that needs to be. Should I just pull it down? Yeah. Yeah, let me just pull it down. There we go. Watch your cord. Yep, I see the cord. Got some monkey business going on. All right. Whew, that's better. All right, let's see. Candace, good evening. Thank you. And Ryan says, yes, immense. Thank you. It is a good feeling, isn't it? Oh, God, it's just been so much work lately. It's crazy. And I'm still pumping out orders and stuff because there's orders coming in. And thank you for that. I need those orders coming in because I haven't been putting out a ton of new stuff. But there are a lot of new classes out right now. It's just a hard time because I'm trying to finish up the second book, too. And there are quite a few classes out. So I'll be live for lots of classes in the next few weeks. I hope you're signing up for some of those. Tons of fun, particularly if we have like an event happening at Sauter in 2024. We want to talk about getting pieces and getting them hung there and all of that stuff too. That is like leveling up in a huge way. Kirsten, happy Friday. Great to see you. It's hotter in Vermont, according to your message, than it was here today. That is really amazing. Pamela, great to see you. That was such a good post on our Facebook group. Pamela posted, we've been watching, if you're in our Facebook group, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club, we've been watching you, I don't want to say struggle, but it is super scary when someone has cancer, like your husband, and not anymore. So 5 months of stage 4 stomach cancer. Husband is cancer free. We're celebrating quietly tonight. But we feel like shouting. Thank you for all your prayers. There was those posts were so beautiful. Everybody chiming in and saying prayers, thinking of you. However each person says it, it's sending so much love, isn't it? And such good news. Such good news. It reminds me of the time when I was living in Amsterdam, because the Dutch, I'm not going to start, but the Dutch are very dour, right? That's like that. There's a reason why people say that, and they're not super expressive and emotional, and certainly not in public. You don't typically like make eye contact with people and stuff. And there was one day that I was coming home from being super bumped out and pregnant. It must have been with Teddy, because I had him in Amsterdam and I had Joss in Zandijk. And I was coming home, and yeah, either I was there or I heard the story. It was one or the other. But there was a guy who got on at the same stop, which was the hospital, and started shouting, "I'm going to live, I'm going to live." I mean, that is like just, yeah, so exciting, so exciting. And I think those things are quiet things, aren't they? You're celebrating quietly. Sometimes like the biggest moments in your life are like quite quiet, aren't they? You think that they're going to blast out with music and bells and gongs and noise and firecrackers and streamers, and the best thing is just to celebrate quietly. And I'm sure you're exhausted too, because that's so much emotional stuff. Pamela, I'm so happy for you and your husband. I'm so happy. Just catching up. Sorry. Yeah, that's a big thing. That got me for stalled me for a minute, because I'm just thinking about how that must feel. Ryan says, so happy for you all. Absolutely. Mom, great to see you. Cheers, my dears, on this lovely Friday from very warm and sunny Granby, Connecticut, and Bethany in New Haven, Connecticut. Lisa, great to see you. Happy Friday. Dave, that is great news, isn't it? We have to celebrate together here. We'll celebrate quietly. We won't be fools. We'll celebrate quietly, but it is such good news. It is the best news, right? It's the best news in the world. Melanie, great to see you. We are having a wonderful day, and you are in Western Washington. I hope you're doing well today, too. Happy weekend. It's time. Linda B. Comfy in shorts here in Jersey with flowers and trees popping all around. Beautiful tulip. Absolutely. Oh, I'm going to keep an eye on that thread and see what you all are saying to each other. Yeah, I switched into some lighter gear too. And if it gets really cold, I'm going to take this denim skirt off, because you'll never know that I did it. You'll just see me do this for a minute, because it is terribly warm still. So let's get started. I'm super excited. I want to look at this book together. We've got like a few little trivia questions that are associated with this book. It's going to be a very fun night. I am a bit swirly, not because of this, just because of the hanging the show in Hartford and gearing up for that. And then the Sauter Village thing was really exciting, really exciting, because I'm really new to the game. And I know I'm like a gate crasher. I know I am. And I'm really pleased to be invited to do like big stuff over there. So I feel like, yeah, I broke through the fourth wall somehow, and, so kind of exciting. Cheers, my dears. Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at this gorgeous book. So, this exhibit was going around, and there was talk among people the teachers, McGowan teachers, who had submitted rugs for it, saying it's touring all over the place, but there needs to be a book, right? So there was no talk of a book for a long time, and then Robin did write a book, which was great. She's a perfect person to write the book, because she's the one that had the idea to do this. Now, the patterns in this book belong to Honey Beehive, right? So competitor in Connecticut. She's great, beautiful patterns available there. Always selling other people's stuff on the show, but they are gorgeous patterns. Now, most of these, but we'll talk on a case-by-case basis, but we are mostly talking about the golden age of illustration, which kind of ended around Norman Rockwell, right? He's considered like the very tail end of the golden age of illustration. When he starts illustrating in like the 1920s, 1930s, that's the tail end. It was really the late Victorian period that is officially known as the golden age. because it was that moment where, for so many reasons, particularly in Europe, um, folk stories were very important. And there was a lot of wars and social and economic struggles at that time. We're not going to go into the history of all of the European countries. But for so many reasons, people were trying to shore up their national identity and their personal stories by putting collections of books together, and often fairy tales. Fairy tales are so often, and I know I've said this to you before. If you're a new watcher, maybe you haven't heard this. When we talk about Grimm's fairy tales, or we'll talk about all of the name drops today, tonight, and on Monday. But many of these books, we now think, oh, those are not appropriate for kids. They're really hardcore, just inappropriate content. And the reason for that is they were not intended for kids when they were written and collected. Most fairy tales, we call them fairy tales now like it's something quaint. They were like magical stories that were kind of science fiction stories, and they involved like horror and murder and very heavy subjects like um, child abandonment, Hansel and Gretel, incest, murder. I mean, it's everything. It's CSI, isn't it? It's everything. And they were not meant to be read to kids. But as the Grimm brothers, right, which they did, realized that children were hearing the stories, being read the stories, and reading the stories themselves, they sanitized them hugely. And then there are later editions of books where we have different endings, lots of lost scenes. So it's an interesting thing, this study of fairy tales, right? Because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of sex, there's a lot of death, there's a lot of crime, because these are exciting, seedy stories. They were folk stories. That means the folks liked them, right? The folks like everything. The folks like a good yarn, and it's hardly sanitized, like sitting around a table telling really spectacular stories. Over time, the fairy tale has come to belong to children, but during the Victorian period, that was not the case, right? It belonged to the public, and it was up to parents and nannies to decide what children heard. So, with that as a preface, we're not looking at anything really sordid tonight. These are really lovely illustrations. My point is that everything that is before 1928 is copyright free. So, for the most part, that's a blanket statement, but it's a huge, heavy blanket, and it covers almost everything. Because of that, it means that most of the illustrations featured in these books, with many more illustrations in them, are copyright free, with few exceptions. So you just make sure that you check if you're doing something commercial with it. But it's interesting because there are so many. There are so many illustrations. This is called the golden age of illustration because putting illustrations in books was very, very common. Photography in books was not common, right? We're going to get, the closer we get to the 20th century, the more we see in newspapers and periodicals photography used to illustrate. Until that point, we don't. It's partly technology, it's partly what for, right? People are still celebrate. There is photography, but people really still celebrate the fantasy and the whimsy side of illustrating. And most illustrations by far are done by engraving, right? Which is like almost like sculpting into a plate, inking it and transferring it. So very old-fashioned kind of Rembrandt-y style of medium. And then the further we get along toward the 20th century, we're looking more at watercolors. We're looking also at new materials being available to everybody, and with more sort of paint supplies and types of paints being available to the masses, we get different mediums showing up all over the place, and pictures start to look quite different. So with this book, you can almost do, it's not in chronological order, but you can almost do the history of an illustration from like Gustave Doré, who does like the really serious engravings, right up to like the 1920s when we're talking about Kay Nielsen and kind of very theatrical Erte style illustration, very whimsical, very light, very subject-wise light, and also color-wise light. So we run the gamut with fairy tales. It's an interesting subject to dive into. It's also fun to think about going to like a local used bookstore and just tearing through the children's books, not actually tearing them up, of course, just looking at them and going, "Ooh, interesting illustration. I love this book, and this is pre-1930. I know I'm safe. This is certainly going to be copyright free." Right? Finding illustrations that way, even altering them and tweaking them to be exactly the way that you want them. It's an interesting subject to talk about. I'm very happy that this came out as a book. So this is what it looks. I mean, it just looks like a gorgeous book. It's a thickie too. It's one of the thicker ones, I have to say. It's 120 pages. Some of it's index at the back. As you can imagine, it's highly sourced because at the end there's many index pages. Um, there would have to be, right? It's like the footnotes to all of this information all needs to be cited. Now, I know when the event was touring, and it still is, but we looked at it at least once, and I showed some pictures then. So I'm not going to show the same pictures, and I'm not going to really show my favorite pictures, right? I don't like to show sort of favoritism. Some of them I will say, oh, that's my favorite. But mostly I'm showing ones that we, number one, haven't seen before, and number two, I feel like there could be something in it for you to dig into because of the illustrator, the purity of illustration, copyright free, or of course Honey Beehive, right? Getting the actual pattern if you love the exact illustration from Honey Beehive. These are large illustrations. These are really large. So let's get started with, I'm going to get to the cover one later in the book because that's more toward the end of the book. I'm going to go in chronological order according to this book, not according to any timeline. So let's get started here and let's see. The sort of frontispiece is this piece here, which I'm going to show you. It's going to be our first slide. I took these early this morning before anybody was awake, so I tried to get the blue out a little bit with that early morning light. I think I did okay. That's pretty true to the picture. So this is actually an illustration in the front, a spray of wild hemlock, an illustration by a great Scottish illustrator called Jessie M. King, and her life was between 1874 and 1949. So this is a spray of wild hemlock. This one's a smaller piece. It's 20 by 29, number 3 cut and number 4 cut, wool on linen, hooked by Jennifer Curran, Curran. And this page, and I'm actually coming to the end of the page because that was like a sneak peek, and this appears later in the book, the section on Jessie Smith, because Jessie Smith really is wonderful, and we are going to talk about her a little bit. It is said that Jessie Marion King, I'm sorry, I said Smith, and I meant King. There is another Jessie Smith. That was a different episode. Jessie Marion King was heavily influenced by Art Nouveau and the developing Glasgow style. That is its own conversation. A style developed by a group of designers in and around Glasgow, Scotland. But, I wonder if Bob's on tonight. He's in Scotland. But, if it can be argued that King heavily influenced Art Nouveau and was personally responsible for much of the development of the Glasgow style, then that would be a conversation, right? So it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. At the age of 17, she entered the Glasgow School of Art, where she studied and taught alongside Charles Rennie Mackintosh, winning the gold medal for book design at an international 1902 Turin exhibition. That led King to wide acclaim, right? So she becomes famous at a quite young age. She's one of 5 children. There's some historical information here. One of the things I have to say about this book that I really love, because I think a lot of us are history lovers here. You know, they do a whole section. This is the image that I was showing you that's larger in the front. We're going to look at this one in a minute or a little bit later. But, I mean, this is the information they're giving you on Jessie King, right? So in terms of being an illustrator and knowing a little bit about her life, her background, you know, she dies in 1945, so she lives through 2 world wars, spectacular, crazy times in England, in Scotland. So it's interesting, the biographical information that's included in this book. It's very thorough. Nothing is complete, right? But it's super thorough. It's like all you need to know about a lot of different illustrators from this period. Really exciting. So this one is in the front, right? This is kind of featured in the front, and then the conversation happens a little bit later about this woman, Jessie M. King, Jessie Marion King. Isn't she pretty? Doesn't she have this kind of haunting prettiness? I mean, she's obviously dressed in high style according to the Victorian period. She was just absolutely, I don't know, something about her droopy eyes and her full lips. She's just pretty, pretty woman. So she illustrates a lot of things at this time, and she is a huge player. She's not a name that we tend to know nowadays, but she's a huge player. She also illustrated The Little Mermaid, right? So this style is leading us right into the 20th century, right? 1902, she starts winning awards, brings us right into the 20th century, and we're seeing that kind of transition from the Art Nouveau period to the Art Deco period, completely and distinctly different. So this is a Little Mermaid, another one of the books that Hans Christian Andersen that she illustrated. You can see the amount of, this is a Jesse King painting, right? This isn't a hook truck. So hey, this is one that's up for grabs and fun to do. Really interesting, right? The kinds of halos around the head, the ribbons of hair, the kind of wading through the shallow end, the froth of bubbles and starfish and seaweed. It's really an interesting composition. Um, it's weirdly simple, although the bottom part is very, very busy. Lots of white featured, lots of neutrals, lots of nymph type figures. You know you're into the 1920s when you see these boyish bodies, right? Really neat illustration. This is another one of hers. Some of these that are not being used by the Pearl McGowan teachers, some that I've been researching and using for the Design Light class, are going to pop up at Ribbon Candy Hooking over the weekend, right? So I'm not going to go for the same ones because those are already done by Melissa at Honey Beehive. But I want to go for some others that were not necessarily used for fairy tales, like this one. This one is called How Beautiful Are Thy Feet, right? So she did illustrating for a lot of different things, books and fairy tales, children's books, advertising, all kinds of things. And she really, I felt, had her finger, this one is called, sorry, Magic. You see the birds flying through and making that kind of spear-like purple wave right over the fairy's head, right? It's so simple. It's super magical. And again, this nymph-like body laying out like a little crawfish or something, and then this long braid hanging down. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. Oh, I didn't realize there's a whole bunch more people on the thread. I'm so sorry. Juju, great to see you. Happy Friday, beautiful day in Pennsylvania. I'm so glad to hear it. I'm so sorry. I didn't see there was more excitement under the box. Gayla, great to see you. Judy, great to see you. So happy for Pamela. So happy for Pamela's husband. Dave is having, thank you for the update. I felt you were very remiss, but you actually did tell us you are having fish and chips, Pilsner beer. Cheers, my dears, everyone. Cheers to you, too. Brenda, great to see you in, oh, Dunedin, Florida, right? Janelle, great to see you in New Hampshire. So happy to see you. And Bonnie in Palm Coast, Florida. Oh, you are so welcome. That book should be on the way to you. Exciting, right? And we have our last book giveaway, the Celtic book. Not this coming week, but the following week. And that will be exciting again. And everybody's welcome to enter, even the winners. Carrie, great to see you in Clearwater, Florida. Gail, good morning in Australia. Cheers, my dears, with your coffee cup. Carrie, wish I was closer to the rug show. Me too. Me too. I keep saying to people who are around here, you're coming, right? And some people are like, maybe I'll come. I said, come on, are you serious? Do you know how many people wish that they could come and like be a part of this and just say hello to each other? There's gonna be so many of us there. It's not just me. It's Naomi at Ravensgate Primitive. It's Michelle McGarelli. I think Deborah Wallen is coming from Seaside. They all have stuff in the show. It's a great, great, great time. And Carrie, next time, right? Ryan, if anyone's going to Charter Oak, if you could get a photo of my two pieces, yes. I will, but as many photos as possible. More is better, right? This is not a case of less is more. I wish you could attend too. We're going to have more stuff more often. We're getting bigger and bigger as a group, and everything that we do together, anything that I'm involved in, is always going to be a community project. It's never going to be me and more me. It's going to be us always. So there's going to be lots of stuff in the future. It's not just I'm in Connecticut, so this was easy and this was given and offered, and I said absolutely. But we are going to strike out and do more things in different places so that everybody can be involved and everybody can walk in and enjoy a show. Anita, great to see you in London, Ontario. Happy Friday night. Melissa, good to see you. Oh, wait a minute. I can't wait to see the rugs Andrea John gave me. Oh, John gave up and went to bed. I spent his money on art supplies today. Oops. Uh-oh. Did I do that? Oh well. He'll forgive you. He'll forget about it in the morning, right? Diana, great to see you. Another buddy in Australia, in Brisbane, Australia. Gail, I forget where you are. Are you close to Diana? Wouldn't that be fun? Oh, you're on it. You're on it. How fun. Kirsten, great news. Paula T in California, great to see you. I can't believe I missed the whole bottom of the thread. Doreen, great to see you. Robin, Oh, I'm catching up on everything that you're writing. Everybody is so happy for Pamela. It is a beautiful group. We all sincerely care. I know we do. Quiltessa, Perk Quilt, Barbara, great to see you. Carrie, definitely dark stories, fairy tales, super dark stories. And we're going to talk about some of the plots of these stories. They're so crazy. Andrea says, I wonder what a modern fairy story would be about. You know, that's something that Hollywood keeps doing again and again, isn't it? Isn't it fun? I mean, I can't think of one off the top of my head, maybe like Serendipity or something like that. Um, I guess a fairy tale is not exactly the same as a fable, right? Because a fable has some kind of moralistic message, and a fairy tale doesn't have to. So when we think about fairy tales that don't have a specific moral, for example, The Princess and the Pea and Puss in Boots, right? Maybe we'll talk about both of those later. I think we're going to see some illustrations. You know, it is folk stories and it's just storytelling. And I think things that maybe were interesting story wise, and certainly the plot of a story, when you go further back in generations, if you read older books or older novels, sometimes you're like, whoa, this is slow moving. Right, and sometimes those are my favorite ones, like the Angela Thirples and the Barbara Pims. Whoa, they're super slow moving. That's why I love them so much. It's super relaxing and atmospheric. But you can see that the pace of life has picked up hugely. And so has storytelling. So it's interesting because when we look at a story like, for example, Puss in Boots, it's like, huh, okay, a story about a cat who is given to the third brother as like an inheritance, and the brother doesn't even want him because the first brother got the house and the second brother got the cash, and he gets the cat. But then the cat turns out to be this weird, mischievous kind of kingpin of a cat who then like dictates to the boy, who's a complete boob, what he should do with his life and when he should do it. And everything revolves around the movements of the royal carriage and the princess, who he sees as a possible suitor for his boy. And it's really the cat who, remember this story, how crazy it was? It's really the cat who masterminds this plot for the girl to notice the boy because he's swimming nude in the river, and she falls in love with him, and they marry the same day, which is super convenient because that places Puss in the castle, and then he has like a lifetime of luxury and excess, right? But it's a weird story, and it's one of these stories really without a moral. And I'm sure some people would argue that the moral is maybe God helps those who help themselves, something like that. Or like, the more you lean into your resources, whatever they are, the better off you'll be. That kind of a moral, like build it, they will come kind of a story. But other people would say that's just a nutty story. It's super amoral story too. This like conniving, cheating, lying cat who puts people in dangerous situations for his own, benefit. Fairy tales are just like that, aren't they? They don't always have a moral. They don't always have a bad guy either. So it's weird to kind of define it. It's a bit of a moving target. So it is interesting to say, like, what would a modern fairy tale be about? Because when I think about it, and you think about this too, some of the stories that I read when I was younger, like with my mom and my grandmother. Um, we read from those books with the green covers. Do you know what I mean? They were almost like primers. Maybe they were primers, like roads and something, traffic and roads, stuff like that. And there was one about a girl. Tell me if you remember this story. It was so good. I don't remember what it was called, but it was about two sisters, and it was like a fairy tale, but it's not in our catalog of fairy tales, and it would be wonderful to illustrate. It was about two sisters, and one was super kind and beautiful, and the other one was ugly and lazy, right? It was one of those. So the one that was kind and beautiful fell down the well in the yard, and when she got to the bottom, there was like an alternate universe, right? And there was this old woman there who was all, like a little crone, and she needed help with everything because she could barely move. And this beautiful young girl who fell down the well, the sister, is like, can I help you make your beds? Can I help you make your food? Can I do your shopping? Can I tend to the pets? Can I tend to the yard? And she did everything for this woman. And this woman said, like, my dear, you have done enough. It is time for you to go back to your family. And when she went back to the well to do kind of a Star Trek holodeck thing, she was showered with gold coins. And when she arrived at surface level again in her yard, she was covered with gold coins. And then the ugly, lazy sister went, oh my God, I would like to have some gold coins. So she threw herself down the well. And when she got down there, the old lady was waiting for her. And the lazy sister was like, do you remember this? She was like, yeah, I don't want to make the beds. Like, that's not me. I don't do that. Like, honey badger doesn't do that. And everything that the old woman asked her to do, she was like, yeah, not me. That's someone else, not me. And so when it was her turn to leave, spoiler alert, the woman's like, okay, time to eject you back up the well. And she put her in the well, and instead of being covered with golden coins and like honey or something to make them stick, she was covered with like tar and I want to say feathers, but maybe not feathers, just tar. And that illustration, it was one of the most traumatic things that I have ever seen in my life, right? And I found the book and I read it to my kids. I shouldn't have, because it's not like it's violent, it's not like there's blood, it's not like there's torture, but there's something about that illustration with the girl, and the tar covering her that was so horrifying that like I looked for that book forever because I thought that part of me is stuck in that book because it was so traumatic. And it was one of those stories that I thought about even before I found the book as an adult. Whenever I was being lazy, I'm thinking, oh my God, the girl with the well and the tar and the pretty girl with the coins we remember these stories because they have these tropes, right? And by tropes, I mean like gold coins. You know that that's good. Tar, you know that that's bad, right? Falling down a well, that's kind of a fairy tale thing. There are all these elements to these stories that are part of our cultural history that we recognize the parts of, right? And I think it's more those tropes that make something a fairy tale recognizable, right? And it's different from country to country as well. That we associate more with like a fairy story, no fairies, right? There's hardly ever any fairies, than it is like a specific formula. So it is long-winded. Andrea, it's a great question and I don't know the answer at all. But it's open for conversation. I'd love to hear your opinion on that subject. Judy says Johnny Gruelle's books popped into my head thinking about fairy tales. Oh, interesting. I had lots of his books. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to Google him, Judy. Can you send me a note so I don't forget that? I would love to. I would love to Google him. You know what? Let me just take a picture of that thread. You know how I do these stupid things, so I don't forget later. I don't want to give you a project because I'm lazy. Tar. All right, hold on just a second. Let me just get that. Yeah, I'll check that out later. Pamela says, I prefer illustrations from the past. J.C. Leidendecker, Leandecker was one of my favorite magazine illustrators. There were so many great ones from the 20s. Okay, I'm going to take a picture of that too. Interesting. I remember last year at the Norman Rockwell Museum, I went because there was the moving exhibit for the year. Actually, it was the year before. Last year it was fantasy books like Dungeons and Dragons manuals and stuff. But the year before it was Golden Age of Illustrator magazine illustrations. I think it was the year before. But anyway, there was a bunch of illustrations that popped up that were not Rockwell, and it was a huge exhibit. And there were a lot of names I'd never heard of before. And I wasn't really doing this yet, so it didn't occur to me to dig in. But I do have the brochure, which was a properly bound book about this size from it. So I'm going to check them out because some of this name dropping might correlate to some of that. Ryan says folklore is the history of people. So fascinating to see what stories at what times latch on to the greater consciousness. That is perfectly put. That'd be great in the first chapter of the introduction. You should be a writer, Ryan. That is great. Every story has a lesson. Every story does, and I don't think every story has a moral. But I think if you want to pull some layer out of every story, even Puss in Boots, you can. If you mean to, you will. And it really depends on how you view the characters, right? Because some people would say, oh, that Puss in Boots, good for him. He figured out how to make a bad situation better. And other people would say, what is this cat being rewarded for being a liar and a cheat? Right? So it really depends on your interpretation of it too. And neither is going to be wrong. This is subjective talk, isn't it? Interesting. Pamela says, is that the same group as the Scottish colorists? I don't think so. I'm not completely sure. I'm not super up on Scottish art except for Macintosh. And I'm not completely sure. That's something else I want to Google. Let me take one more picture and I'm going to stop being a geek here. Carrie says, Deanna, are you an art history major? No, I went to college like 4 times for 4 different kinds of art. And that was always the thing that I liked the most when I was growing up in school too. I went into English literature in the end, like at that level, but I have a theater degree, textile degree. But of course it included a lot of art, as you can imagine. Melanie says, Andrea, that would be the internet, right? The dangers of the internet would be absolutely. Geez, can't work the keyboard today. Modern fairy tale would have to be about the dangers of the internet. I gotcha. That would be a great story, right? That would be a great story or a great comic book. right? Just using the medium of today too, like sort of more contemporary art illustration. Barbara says, I'm trying to get my schedule straight. I don't want to miss these lives. Usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday still. And sometimes I'm having a crazy time and I just can't. Sometimes I'm having a personal breakdown and I just can't. But usually I'm here Monday and Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time and Fridays at 7 for the big blowout show like tonight. Judy says, my kids had a Cajun version of that story. How funny is that? It was beautifully illustrated. Ryan says, we used to read scary stories to tell in the dark. I remember that to each other as a child. Always so scary, and the illustrations, now beautiful, were so frightening. It's true, isn't it? That really changes as you get older. That's so funny because I'm thinking of illustrations that scared me too in like Stephen King books and stuff like that. Not that they were heavily illustrated, but sometimes even the cover art was a bit too graphic for me when I was younger. You know, I was a bit soft in my Catholic school, right? You probably remember Gruelle from Raggedy Ann and Andy stories, but he did tons, yes, of fairy stories as well. Oh, that is interesting, because that was beautiful illustration, the Raggedy Ann and Andy stories, wasn't it? And their horse and all of the different characters. It was like an early Toy Story, their life in the nursery, right? It was like definitely like shades of later Toy Story. Diane says, Chardonnay here in Bay Roberts, Newfoundland. Fantastic. Cheers, my dears. Gives me a chance to sip too. I'll do it with a different spelling, Pamela. Thanks for letting me know, because I am not good on the computer either, but I bet I can find that. So interesting. We haven't gotten very far yet. Let me keep going. My mouth is running like crazy. So let's see. We were looking at Jessie Marion King. So I just wanted to show you some of these because I am going to put these up in ribbon candy hooking, some of these and some more. And I just really love them. Conversation with the Fairy, right? And remember that in this period of art, white is new. Like using white is new. Like, yes, this works well as an illustration, but so does a completely black background. We get a lot of very dark fairy stories, don't we? So using this kind of light color is really interesting. Thought that was a mosquito. And something new, right? Because white was considered not a color, and suddenly it was put forward, like gray, as being not just a great neutral, but a great main color. And we're seeing more and more negative space in some of these illustrations as the color white becomes more and more popular in design and in interior design. This one is called Birthday of the Infanta, like plural children, and I think they're dolls. So very, very pretty, very different style of illustration, isn't it? Now, this is the next one that I pulled from this book. This is, hang on a second while I shoot to that page. And again, I was trying to choose, wait a minute. I was trying to choose ones that we definitely haven't looked at yet because I thought a little bit more fun, right? Hang on while I search for that page. Getting there, getting there. I feel we're getting closer. Gosh, are we getting closer? There we are. Okay, so this is the fairy tale castle at, I can never pronounce this. This is the Disney castle, right? The German castle that is the basis for the castle at the Magic Kingdom. The fairy tale castle Neuschwanstein. Neuschwanstein. Should have my German Neuschwanstein, right? There's got to be a better way to say it. Illustration by the very famous, but not so much anymore, Margaret Noble. Right, this was a big name back in the day. This piece is 16 by 24, number 2 and number 3 cut wool with sparkle yarn on linen, hooked by Linda Bell. And this I'm gonna return to a conversation on this particular piece. Let me just read you this tag because I think Linda wrote this this part. Wool swatches were dyed in the colors of the painting to recreate the look of the illustration. Sparkle yarn was added after the hooking was completed. The greatest challenge of hooking this piece was capturing the tiny details of the castle. Unlike the other illustrations referenced in this book, the castle is not a fictitious scene. Isn't that interesting? Think about that in context of what we were just talking about. This place is actually here. This isn't Brigadoon. This isn't Oz, right? This is actually a castle in Germany. Great point, Linda. It is a real castle in Neuschwanstein, Germany. The painting does not, I actually have a painting of that castle. It looks nothing like this. Have it up in the bathroom. That's probably not right, but it's so beautiful. It's such a magical looking, turreted castle, right? The painting does not represent a specific story, but was used on the cover of a fairy tale anthology. Well, that makes perfect sense. This is very blue, and I even warmed it up. It's a very blue piece. Let me show you in the book, too. It's maybe not as blue as my illustration, and it is nighttime here. Remember, it's dark out. So, absolutely beautiful piece. I love that it was a cover piece rather than illustrating a specific scene. And I love that point that this is actually a place. Interesting, isn't it? Let me show you what the real picture looks like. So this is Margaret Noble painting this, and she was gorgeous, isn't it? Obviously, this image is copyrighted. Can't remember where I found it. It's naughty that I didn't cite it, but sorry about that. Absolutely beautiful piece. You can see there are what seem to be houses sinking into the water behind it. Maybe that is part. It almost looks like, I mean, it's out of context, isn't it? Because the castle is not situated on top of these highly eroded cliffs, right? It is right on a beautiful grassy lawn. Oh, Pamela says, I visited Neuschwanstein when I was 7 years old. We lived in Germany until I was 10. This was a magical place, and inside was a dream come true for any little girl who could imagine being a princess. Oh, that is so cool. That is so cool. I would love to. I've been to Germany, but not here. I would love to check out this castle. I just want, okay, I don't want to go there yet. I want to stay here for a minute because I just want to give you an idea of what the format of this book is like as well. So chapter by chapter, there's a lot of information in here besides pretty pictures. So I love pretty pictures and I love the eye candy, but isn't it great to learn something too? Especially if it hits you right in the heart. It's so nostalgic, this subject. You get lots of chapters like this, The Golden Age of Illustration. A great quote by Maurice Sendak, not out of copyright, more contemporary illustrator, Where the Wild Things Are. Illustrations have as much to say as the text. The trick is to say the same thing, but in a different way. It's a great point, isn't it? It makes me think about songs and how sometimes my favorite songs, I realize, are not like the best music musically, but I love the words and I like them the most because I love the words, right? So sometimes that can happen with illustration too. You take the words away from the picture, and the picture maybe says more to you than what the words are saying to you. That can absolutely happen, can it? That's an interesting point. So this chapter talks about the beginnings of the golden age of illustration, brilliant collaborations like John Tenniel and Lewis Carroll, right? Those will come up later in the book. So it talks in a very academic way, in a very well researched and well written way. Art improvements, more and better philosophy for children's books, walking you into the history of children's books. Alice in Wonderland, of course. I don't have this one in the slideshow, but this is a John Tenniel illustration, Hooked by Jennifer Sleeper. This whole chapter is wonderful for information. And, you know, when you feel like it, sometimes you feel like looking at the pictures, sometimes you feel like reading the text. Luckily, there's both in this book. Oh, Teddy says hi. Hey, Ted. Hope you had fun at movie night across the street with the buddies. Is it on a crack? Melanie, in my painting, it's on a grassy lawn. Really? Is it high up? It's not high up like that, though, surely. Because then who could get there besides Go-Go Gadget, right, with his feet, like, you know? Interesting. In the painting that I have, it looks like it's on this beautiful rolling lawn. It's not funny. Completely out of context. And at the Magic Kingdom, it's on the pavement, isn't it? Like the reproduction of it. So funny. Thanks for telling me, Melanie, because if I ever go, I won't be completely confused and backed up, right? Kirsten says hi to Teddy. What a sweetheart. High up on a cliff with a view of the river. Okay, hang on. I got to go back. So does it look like this? I mean, it can't be this dramatic, can it? I mean, wouldn't it be unsafe? Maybe this is a little bit exaggerated. And Gami says, hello, Ted, I love you. That sweet person. Interesting information. I guess this is part of the lore of this castle. There is a road from the bottom of the mountain that goes all the way up. So, Pamela, would you say that it looks like this, like a crazy iceberg or something? And are you kind of circling it, like with the car to get up to the top? And is there a space around it? I've got a lot of questions. I'm sorry. Is there space around it when you get to the top? Or is it like, uh-oh? I mean, they must have that fenced up at this point. That is super romantic. That is not what I thought at all. And I have pictured this place a lot. I feel like that painting really did me wrong. I'm going to move on, although I'm not done with this conversation. Pamela says, yes, it's dramatic, but not in the same context. So it's a little bit exaggerated in the original illustration, and Linda hooked it beautifully. And you can see she hooked it so close to the original illustration. But I have to actually say that with many of these hooked rugs that we're seeing in this book, not just because I'm a rug hooker and I love it, I like the hooked rugs more because there's something about, remember was it this one? Yeah, when Linda says she hooked in the sparkle wool yarn after, like last, and you can see, I'm not going to go back to that slide, but you can see how there are some dots of white, and I think that's where the sparkle is. Because I thought, oh, what's going on with the quality of the photo? I think that's where the sparkle is sparkling. So she hooked at that in after, and my point is, isn't it great that with our craft, it's possible to, it's such a warm and tactile craft, isn't it? Using fiber. I feel like there's so much more you can do than just putting color on a piece of paper. But that's why I love textile arts more than, for example, painting, usually. So, I mean, we can add all kinds of layers of interest, height, sparkle, different materials, right? And that is such a gift. That is our gift. That is our sort of prerogative as hookers to know that we have those possibilities always right there in front of us. It's always interesting, and I think for that reason, um, oh, Melanie, because it's supposed to be like impenetrable because it's up high, bit of a Monty Python, right? Like pouring stuff out the windows. Remember, hot water. I mean, they did do that. Pour boiling water out while people were trying to scale. What a way to go! Falling off of a castle and getting like a first-degree burn. Rough times, right? Rough times. But that would make it fairly unapproachable. Make it very, very hard for like Stop and Shop to do the Peapod deliveries too. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm such a spoiled brat. Pamela says it's open to the public still, as it has been for a long, long time. We walked up the roadway from the car park to the castle's grounds, which are immense. It's a huge castle. Oh, that's so interesting. Side note, while we're running the show, what's your favorite castle? Because there's a lot of favorites for this castle here, and a lot of people have traveled to it. I would have to say my favorite castle, I think, is Arundel Castle in England. It's not that far from London. I just love the feel of it. I just love it. I also love Edinburgh Castle and Stirling Castle. There's not a lot of castles I don't like. Here in Connecticut, I love Gillette Castle, where William Gillette lived, who played Sherlock Holmes on stage for so many years. It's not like a castle like that, but it is on the Connecticut River, and it's full of like kind of wacky mystery um, furniture that has tricks to opening it. He played a lot of games on his house guests. As soon as they're open again on a regular basis, I want to go and record there because he has a beautiful hooked rug of two cats with a pumpkin. And he also has a collection of cats. Do you remember when we did the Louis Vane episode and we were looking at Louis Vane illustration? It was when I put the Louis Vane illustrations into the Ribbon Candy Hooking Store. And remember, I said, if you remember this episode, Louis Vane also designed some cat futuristic sculptures. Well, I'm sure that some of those are at Gillette Castle because I remember seeing them in his sculptural cat collection, Gillette's cat collection. They're not open a lot. They've been doing a lot of restoration and renovation. I hope it's not too much, if you know what I mean. But yeah, Mom, we loved Arundel Castle, didn't we? It was so much fun there, and all the little tea rooms in Arundel. Oh, it was so fun. As soon as I can go there again, I'm going to go because there's one hooked rug, but I think there's a lot of things for us to talk about there. So, yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun. So this piece, another stellar piece. So this is called Thumbelina Came to Live with a Mouse. Now, this is just absolutely adorable. The illustrator is unknown. So that makes it very copyright free, doesn't it? But you can see that they're kind of hemmed in like bookends with little like shafts of wheat or something, and they seem to be on the ground. I just love this moment. This is hooked by Sue Morin, Morin. This piece is 20 by 28.5. These are smaller pieces we're seeing at the beginning. 3, 4, and 6 cut on linen. During the Golden Age, publishers were eager to capitalize on the craze of with anthologies of fairy tales and children's stories. They hired artists who would work for low fees and no credit, hoping to break into the industry. The unknown artist of this work is an example of this practice. Morin modified the illustration's color plan somewhat to add some personalization to the rug. The greatest challenge was dyeing the right shades of gray for the mouse. I can see that that would be a thing, right? But the mouse is knitting, Judy. Yeah, the mouse is knitting, and it's three-dimensional. That little bit of knitting, right? It's applied to it, and I think that the little sticks are applied too, tiny little sticks. The greatest challenge was done. In addition to the 8-value gray swatch, textures were added to create realistic fur for the mouse. The mouse is holding a real piece of knitting made with toothpicks. Note how more and cleverly used color to this rug, in this rug. The pink in the mouse's ear, tail, and feet, and Thumbelina's dress completes a circle. Absolutely, you see that now sweeping down. It does complete the circle that's in the sky too. With the use of purple, including subtle shading in the mouse's fur, yet you do see grayish purple in there like a soft lilac, completes a second circle. Oh, interesting. Okay. And the browns, golds, greens, and grays complete more circles, creating visual delight. It does have a circular movement. If you had to choose any letter for this composition, I would first say O or C, which is kind of the same, or even H, right? I still see a very strong H because the characters are on the side and there is a horizontal line. Both of those letters are considered very good composition starts, right? If you just sketch a letter and then you work that way, either of those are going to make a great composition. So this is doubly anchored in greatness. It's just a beautiful piece, and it is quite true. It's an interesting conversation, and it's not just the Gilded Age of illustration, because you know how I love department store history too. It's a big thing during that time too, for people that wrote copy and did illustration for marketing in department stores right up in the 1940s and 50s. Those people worked and illustrated great like covers for catalogs and things like that, and they were not cited as being the illustrators for them, and often not the writers for them, because you were hired, at least like in the 30s, 40s, 50s in department stores, you were hired as part of a team. And whether you did 90% of it, everybody feels like they do 90%, everyone else is slacking off, but whether you did 90% of it or not, doesn't matter. If they chose your illustration or your words for the cover, you would not be cited as being the artist who did that, because you were being paid by the hour. You were happy to have a job, and that's what you signed up for. So going right into the middle of the 20th century, we do see this. We harp on copyright like crazy now, but it is a brand new thing that we harp on copyright, and probably rightfully so, right? I have mixed feelings about it, but I do know that in the 1940s, heading right into the 1950s, people did not get credit for a lot of their work because they were paid hourly, right? And that's just the way it was. And you were happy to work as an artist and be paid and pay your bills. So it's an interesting conversation, and it's not just the Gilded Age of fairy tales. It goes right through to the middle of the 20th century. So let's look at some more, because we are already at 8 o'clock. What are we doing tonight? We might have to stretch this out a bit. Now, this should look familiar, right? So John Tenniel is the person who illustrated Alice in Wonderland with Lewis Carroll. And there are copyright issues with this, not with this particular design, because Disney has renewed the story using these characters the way that John Tenniel drew them. So that's the thing that you always want to look at when you're looking at reproducing stuff. This is a beautiful vignette of the Queen of Hearts, not set in any one setting, right? It's just a character against blue, very effective, very strong, off with her head, right? What a horrible character this is. The Queen of Hearts, illustration by John Tenniel, 23 by 28.5 on rug warp, hooked by Susie Phipps. Susie elected to make the Queen of Hearts brighter and more colorful than the original art. The Queen's clothing had to be done richer with more vibrant tones, with more primary color of a real dress, of a regal purple color, right? Purple for royalty only. The yellows and reds were dyed over oatmeal and natural to give dimension to the patterning. The background is done in a darker blue rather than a lighter shade of the original illustration, and the lettering off with her head, the phrase we all associate with the Queen, has been added. That is a great composition. The dress is beautiful too. I love the patchwork quality to the dress and the heart. It's very simple, right? It's not a simple dress. It's done in a very simple way, having this one character, very effective. The lines in her face, right, and that kind of pug nose, Really effective. Even the hand, so both hands are very well done. I like how they're outlined in mustard. That's really standing out against the blue. Has a really magical quality to it. The expression on her face is really something. I keep looking at it. All the patterns on the dress too, really, really something. And I really like this. I'd really like this version because I like this piece because it's not what I thought. Like I always think about the queen as being on this grassy green background, like playing golf or croquet with her flamingos, right? With lots of reds, greens, blacks, whites. I never think of blues and purples and mustard yellows. Maybe mustard yellow. I'm trying to think back because not all of the illustrations are colored, right? Many of them are black and white. They have been colored over time. This is John Tenniel. So this is an illustration of the man, by the man, I think, who himself, who this is what he looked like, did a pen and ink sketch. He was very, very good at pen and ink. And his illustrations are mostly looking like these illustrations from Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So interesting the amounts of cross-hatching, different techniques used. These are not engravings; these are pen and ink, as far as I know. To do these, this is such a familiar one. I'm late. I'm late, right? The cross hatching is making things darker. Everything is on the white background. These really pop against the page. This is a profusely illustrated book. It's not like there's one picture every 10 pages. There's like tons of little pictures and larger pictures. And you can see that the way that the queen is depicted, she's very angry, mean, arrogant, a bit spacey. Her costume's real spacey. Really interesting pieces. I love how Alice stands out against her cape, right? It's a bit of like a Wizard of Oz thing too, like being dragged away, flying away. Really, really effective. And these illustrations through the years have been used for a lot of things, including like antique cartoons, like this one. Changing this famous House of Cards thing into commentary on world markets, right? So they have been historically copyright free. It's only recently that it's more of a thing with a Disney movie, I think in the 1960s. Now, this is an interesting one. I know you know who this is because we were just talking about him. This is Puss in Boots. In illustration, the original illustration is done by Gustave Doré. We're going to talk about him in just a minute. This piece is 20 by 25, number 4 cut, wool, silk thread, ribbon, embellishment, linen by Susan Elcox, Elcox. Absolutely beautiful, vivid, and vibrant. Many of the illustrations we're seeing are so blue heavy. I don't know if that was a thing with the shout out to make these, but this is the first one that stands out to me as being a lot of warm colors. This is really close to the illustration, which I'll show you in a minute. And Susan said the greatest challenge was to translate the very formal engraving from the mid 1800s into an interesting rug. The hooker chose, so this is about Susan, not written by Susan. The hooker chose particular color combinations as a way to successfully bring Puss in Boots to life. That's the thing about Doré, isn't it? And if you're familiar with his work, he's he's not one of my favorites, only because I have trouble relating. Gustave Doré, very, very famous illustrator, arguably the most famous engraver of all time. French, 1832 to 1883. At the age of 15, Gustave Doré saw a display of illustrations in a printer's window and, certain that his own work would be better, convinced the editor to give him a job. By the age of 17, Doré was the highest paid illustrator in France. Amazingly, he was completely self-taught. That is ambition, that is talent, that is destiny. And he is handsome. What a handsome man. But I think what he did, I'm not going to say it's dated, it's a bit on the macabre side, right? If you picture, I'm going to show you a few more of his illustrations. It's just taste, isn't it? They are dark, and I don't just mean like the tone of them and the amount of black present in the engravings. I mean, like if you look at the boy here, this is the moment where Puss is like, get in the river and get naked. And the royal carriage is coming by because it always comes by at this time every day. Get in the river, take your clothes off, be gorgeous, be handsome, because the princess is going to be in the carriage, and if she sees you and falls in love, we are in. So the boy listens to Puss, right? And Puss has already fashioned himself as kind of um, a sort of musketeer type character, like kind of this romantic. What's the word? I'm not finding the word, but this fashion that the Three Musketeers had with the sort of swashbuckling high boots and the wide belt and the cape and the hat with the plume, right? Very, very dashing. Cavalier. That's what I mean, cavalier. So this is the moment where Puss is like, get undressed, get in the water, and then when the carriage pulls by, Puss starts shouting to the king and his daughter, help us, help us! Robbers just came and stole my master's clothing. And the king stops the carriage and is like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, these guys came and stole the clothing. He's making up this lie, right? He hid the clothing. And the king is like, well, who's the guy? Who's the guy in the water? And he's like, well, this is the king of this faraway place that nobody's ever heard of, right? So he just embellishes on the line. He digs in and leans into it. And the king is like, oh my word, this is a royal person. What an indignity to be naked in the river. Come into the carriage and we'll take you home and dress you. So of course he comes into the carriage and the princess falls in love with him. He's handsome, he's gorgeous, he's nude, right? Everything, the stars are aligned. But in this picture, he doesn't look super handsome. He looks a bit distressed. And everything for me that Doré does, and this is not a commentary on Doré, because I like him and I appreciate how good he was. But at the same time, all of his work is a little bit dark, in my opinion. In my opinion, just the way that the characters look. So his work was translated again and again and colored many times. Sometimes the colors that we associate with specific I'm going to have to go back to that, Paula. With specific engravers were never their colors, right? It's the colors of this time, which is probably 1910s, right? Just by the look of it. There's a mouse. Okay, let me see, Paula. There's a mouse hanging from Puss's belt. Oh, there is. Yeah, he does. There was subtext to the story and his pouch too. Um, the one of the sub stories in this I think went something like this. Help me out if I'm wrong. He tricked this. Yeah, I'm remembering this story. It's a crazy story. There was one of the big parts that show him to be the hero of the story instead of the boy. There's a scene where I feel like he was fighting with an ogre or a giant, something much bigger than him, and he would have easily been killed by this creature. And he got into a battle of the wits instead of a battle of strength because he knew it was the only way he could win. And he said something like, well, you can kill me and you would kill me in a fist fight, but I can do things that you can't do, and I bet there's a bunch of things I can name that you can't do. And so the ogre or the giant or whatever it was like, okay, like what do you think that I can't do? Because I can do anything. And Puss said, I don't think that you could turn into a mouse. And the ogre or giant, whichever it was, turned into a mouse, and then Puss grabbed him. And I think that's the mouse. Because that was a big part of the story, because that was like at the beginning of the story where it let you know that Puss was super, super diabolically smart and sly, right? Sly. So, but also he got out of a difficult situation that he would not have won. But I think that's a reference. It probably was earlier that happened. It might have all been on the same day. You know how these fairy tales are. Good. I'm glad that you pointed that out, though, Paula. That's funny. Yeah, I think it's a reference to that part of the story. I thought it was just the ogre or giant that turned into the mouse, but maybe it was more than one. It's been a long time. Now, this is one of the scenes with the king, right, where he's like talking and plea bargaining with the king. I don't know what the thing is that's on the ground. I don't remember all of it, right? For me, it's been a really long time since I've read it. We covered this in the Design Like book, but we really were talking about the designs, not going huge into detail with the storyline. There seems to be a dead cow in this too. Do you see what I mean a little bit? Like even the pottery, like even the whatever kind of bowl that is on top, there seem to be like dead children. I'm not even going to finish that word because that's like so awful. But you see how there are some elements of this that are a bit grotesque. There's a ram. There's like kind of a celebration of things that are a bit macabre and dark and grotesque. So that is Doré, like through and through. So we will leave him, although he is fantastic. And in the annals of art history, you must know him and study him and be familiar with his work because he was an amazing artist. But he might not be your taste. He's not exactly my taste. But I love the illustration by Susan Alcox. And you can see, we'll celebrate Susan's piece all the more because Doré is hard, right? And you see how much more appealing this is than what we saw. I think there might be a little mouse there. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. It's very subtle, if so. It's very subtle. Oh my gosh. I know, very dark. It's very dark. It's not for me. It's really not for me. It came at me in art history, and yeah, it wasn't one of my fave things. So here's our next one that we're going to look at. This is a beautiful piece, Cinderella and the Birds, illustration by Herman, and that's with two N's, German spelling, Vogel, Vogel. And Vogel in German means bird. And that's his name, right? That's his actual name. So, you know, I don't know this. It's got me thinking now. I'm going to circle back to that thought in a minute. But this piece called Cinderella and the Birds is hooked by Linda Powell. Beautiful work, Linda. This is astonishing. In blue tone, it has a very Delft feel to it, doesn't it? He's not Dutch, he's German. 14 by 23, all number 3 cut wool on linen. And it says, this rug retains the feel of the original pen and ink drawing while bringing the illustration to life in subtle color. The image is almost, but not entirely, monochromatic. No, not entirely. There's lots of blues, grays, and there's a little bit of peach and yellow in here too. Artful shading creates warmth that the original illustration lacks. Powell felt Cinderella was praying for something to save her from the wickedness of her situation, and the use of the pure blue in the blues is meant to indicate that hope has finally arrived. So Hermann Vogel, who I'm going to show you the original of this too, he's German. His life is between 1854 and 1921, and he is certainly Germany's most famous and prominent illustrator of the Golden Age. One of the founding members of the German Art Association, sorry, that's Baby the dog. His pen and ink drawings appeared in many editions of German fairy tale books, of which there are many, right? Because the Grimm brothers did a lot of German fairy tales. Noted for his delicate style and the graceful drawings, very different than Doré, isn't it? His work was so popular that it was gathered for a 4-volume collection shortly before his life. So let's look at this. I'm going to stretch this larger for you too. Let's look at this and talk about this a little bit before we move too far forward. So this is the piece that Linda hooked. This is, oops, that's not the original piece. Hold on. That's the original piece. So you can see it is not a colorful piece. It's a black and white piece. It's a pen and ink, right? And the thing that I'm going to go back to Linda's piece to have this conversation. This came up during our Designing Like the Storybook Fairy Tale Volume 1, and we will be breaking into Volume 2 shortly as well. I want to offer a second Design Like class just because I'm ramped up on the Design Like books. Paul Klee is available right now. That will be happening in about 2 to 3 weeks. I'm thinking about, and give me your feedback on this, offering another one right behind it, either the next installation of Designing Like the Storybook Fairy Tale, and we got a lot of very effective designs, many of which are in the Hartford show right now, that came out of that class. Or I was thinking about doing a class in color. And this piece reminded me of both of those things. So let me know what you think about that. A lot of people struggle with color placement, the use of color palettes. We could do a class in that. Without bragging, I feel that's one of my strong points. And I won't just do my colors, right? We'll just talk about color in general through history and what different palettes have been and why. So those are two things that might be coming up. Give me your feedback on that. But this is an interesting piece because if you know the original story of Cinderella, it is a lot darker than the one that we get with Disney, right? There are some serious mutilations and deaths during the course of the story. But one of the things that Disney maintained from the original story, Cinderella is originally, I think, an Italian story that goes to I want to say the 1500s, 1600s, that kind of time. It's really early. And it's a story about a girl who lives with these wicked in-laws, and her mother has died, and there isn't always a magic tree where the mother speaks to her. There isn't always a mouse, mice helping out in a pumpkin that turns into a coach. That isn't Disney. That's before Disney. That's a Victorian era evolution. The mice and the turning into a pumpkin coach and all that. That's not this early, but it's not Disney either. It's in between. one of the things about Cinderella that is interesting as a story. Oh, Paula. Okay, great. The first one is available at Ribbon Candy Hooking, but if you want to be live with me, I'm dying to do the second one. I think we did 5 fairy tales, and I gave lots of drawings for all of them as starting points for people who wanted them, and it was super fun because we were having these conversations about different fairy tales from different places, and it did turn out to be one of the most productive and prolific results from any classes that I've done so far. But the thing about Cinderella that is I think odd and inconsistent is one of the things in the original story, going back to the Italian story, is that she had communion with animals, right, and birds. So this is tricky, right? This is tricky. So in all of the early books, we see Cinderella talking to birds, and we see these pictures of her. They're very Hitchcock, sitting around crying on the, not minimizing it, right? It's sad, crying on the hearth, right? It's miserable. Everybody else has gone to the ball or they're out visiting, and there she is, Cinderella, clean up the hearth, right? The dirtiest job, and she's on the hearth, and all these birds are. It's like yeah, like Tippi Hedren, like swooping down it. But she speaks to birds, right? So it's later mice and all animals, kind of like a Snow White thing, like a James Herriot thing, right? But early it's birds. And they swoop, they descend, they perch on her shoulders, on her clothing, on her face, on her head. It's a lot of birds. It's a bit startling in light of, the Birds movie. But at that time, it was like magical. And the thing that has, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm just putting it to you as something to think about. The thing that's always seemed strange to me about this aspect of the story is that why is she not a witch, right? Because so many fairy tales, there is a person who has magical or superhuman powers to do special things that average people can't do, like speak to birds and have them respond. And yet Cinderella does it, and she's the hero, she's the heroine, and nothing bad happens to her because she's got this weird and unnatural power. I don't understand. It's somehow like slipped under the radar for centuries, like literally centuries, that it was okay that she could speak to birds, right? Puss in Boots being a character is a little bit different, isn't it? It comes like 300 years later, but it's a little bit different because he's a character, he's a talking cat, right? And it's like he is the character. But the thing with her having a special power, that's associated with being a witch, right? And being kind of evil. Because there is no distinction in fairy tales. If you think about Hansel and Gretel, there is no distinction when it comes to talking about powers, right? When they get to that candy house, Hansel and Gretel, and there's the witch is like, yeah, come inside the house, and she's going to turn them, you're going to put them in the stove, and she's definitely wants to fatten up Hansel, and she's going to make his sister help her and enable her because she's like, all lame, fatten him up so they can then like co-murder him, right? She's like an accomplice in the murder. It's all horrible. But she has special powers when they arrive at the house with Hansel and Gretel. In many illustrations, the witch is there. She's not just an old woman who lives alone and is lonely and suspicious because she lives alone in the woods and she's a female. She's there with a bunch of like not a Ouija board, right? Because we're not seeing that yet, but with all kinds of stones and mystical things. And she's obviously doing something that like would fall under the umbrella of witchcraft. And she's evil because that's what she's doing. And yet Cinderella has this crazy power to speak to birds and beckon birds to come and land on her and then do jobs and chores for her. And that's normal. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Because normally there are rules in fairy tales about what makes a good character, what makes a bad character, what makes a suspicious character. And this is one of these weird exceptions where it just doesn't make sense, right? This one falls through the hoops. And I like this illustration because it is this one of these moments where she's calling to the birds, and they are coming, and it's a happy moment. So I think it's only going to be later that we look at the relationship between Cinderella and birds as something that might be a little bit creepier. And yeah, and then it gets softened later in the Victorian period, the 1860s, 1870s, with the next illustrator who makes it makes it possible for her to talk to all kinds of animals, including the mice who help her out. And then that's the story that Disney will sort of pick up on. That's the thread that they will go with. But it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting research project. So much beautiful work by Herman Vogel, because he's such a famous person in his lifetime. This is another scene from Cinderella. I'll stretch it up a little bit. You can see there's like a regal crest on the bottom. This is part. It almost has a book plate quality, doesn't it? That's like the crest that is a bit of foreshadowing, right? That will be hers in the future. Up on top, there's another sort of foreshadowing crest. It's the shoe, right? Beautiful, very architectural style of illustration. We've got the two ugly stepsisters who aren't really that ugly at all, but they are in really kind of gauche, exaggerated fashion styles of the day. So they look a bit absurd and ridiculous. And there is Cinderella with kind of the tools of her trade, like maybe she's cutting wood at the beginning. I don't know. Here are her birds, which are like her protectors, and there she is doing something by the fire. But yeah, it's this. This is about contrasts, isn't it? Her costume, her posture, her colors, as opposed to the two sisters. Most of the illustrations of Vogel's for Cinderella will not be in color, of course, right? Because the whole book can't be color. This is another one, and it's another beautiful one. And now they're showing later on more of her crest, right, with the glass slipper. First, it's a gold slipper, right, and later it's a glass slipper. Bless you, I feel like it was a glass slipper before Disney. I'd have to recheck that. It would be in the first design, like the fairy tale storybook one. It would be in that conversation, that recorded class, because I had recently researched and it was great. But you can see the birds are still at them. They're still landing on her. It's just strange aspect of the story. And then we come to another story that's full of strangeness and wonder, but we love it, don't we? Don't we love it? Do you love it? Do you love it as much? Anything with Judy Garland, I love. So this is probably one of the most famous illustrators of all time, W. William Wallace Denslow. He's an American. His life was between 1856 and 1915. Largely self-taught also, like Doré. His earliest work was designing posters, book plates, book illustrations. He traveled the country as a newspaperman and cartoonist. He visited Chicago to cover the 1893 Columbian Exhibition and ended up staying in the city. It was at the Chicago Press Club where he said that was the first time that he met Frank Baum, right? And Frank Baum had an interesting life too. He was you know what he did? He did department store windows, right? He has a book on he created the vignettes for department store windows. That was one of his early jobs, and that's something I'm really interested in. Before he was a writer and super successful and all that. So this pairing of Denslow and Baum obviously is one of the most prolific, many volumes of books. Really interesting pairing, and so much fantasy here. This was a great team because they really enjoyed each other's work. And it really shows. Melissa says, kind of like the bird lady from Home Alone 2. Remember her with her birds? Absolutely. And that bird lady, to me, is just like the early each day from the steps of St. Paul's. Do you remember Mary Poppins, the bird lady who sits on the steps with her tuppence, the bag? And the kids come and they take a bag and they're feeding all the pigeons. For me, like that moment of Home Alone 2, which I just saw for the first time, like last year or the year before, is like a hat tip to that Mary Poppins scene, which is my favorite song in Mary Poppins. I just love that movie. And I also like Home Alone and Home Alone 2, I have to say. They're winning me over now that I have kids. But yeah, absolutely. Weirdness in any number of birds is going to create weirdness and discomfort. And you can't help but saying Hitchcock, can you? I really like this piece. Let me take a sip because I still have a terrible sore throat. Poppies, inspired by the illustration by Denslow, 24 by 24, 8 value black and white swatches and stash wool strips, hooked by Nancy Gingrich. Oh, Nancy, you killed it with this one. It is out of the park. It is across the highway. It is in orbit. I mean, let me take a sip. That's it, Melanie. We were thinking the same thing, but they're both the same character, I think, just a reprise. I just love the cameo of this. Don't you? Don't you? Because to me, this is a direct reference to the movie The Wizard of Oz that starts in black and white And all of the sudden, when they get, you know, when the house lands and like all of the munchkins come out of the whatevers, it turns into Technicolor, in the first example of Technicolor, and a great moment in cinema, right? So I just love that the border is black and white. It's like, here we go with these original, really wacky looking characters. I mean, isn't this an extraordinary piece? And isn't this what you want to do every time you create a new piece? Don't you want to think of something awesome? Like, okay, I've got this poppies, and I like the dot under the O. That is so, so super deco. It's crazy. I just love it. Um, don't you want to be the person who thinks of something so cool like this? Like, wait a minute. I want to do a nod to the movie too, and make a reference to it, black and white turning into bright colors, right? You always, when you start a new piece, want to think of something awesome like this. And in this case, Nancy did. Nancy thought of something absolutely awesome. Oh, Sharon, I'm still on. I'll be going strong for half an hour. We're hardly making any progress because my mouth is running a lot. We're getting there, actually. We're getting there. Uh-oh, here we go. Sing it with me. I could while away the hours consulting with the flowers, conferring with the rain. Now, who was that? Who was that sang that? Was that Bert Lahr? Am I pulling that out of nowhere? Da 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 da. Oh, my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching. If I only had a brain. Now, this character, unlike the Bert Lahr, is Bert Lahr, isn't it? I keep wanting to say that. I think this movie is so iconic that we now associate the way the characters look with the movie characters. But as you can see, they really do look different, right? Very different. This is a proper scarecrow with a very flat nose. I mean, he is all jangly in the same way. These are illustrations. These are Denslow illustrations. This is Denslow himself, another really handsome man. Can't miss that mustache, can you? But Lahr wasn't the lion. Oh, he was the lion, Ray Bolger. Ray Bolger, you're right. Okay, okay, okay. So wait a minute. So Bert Lahr was the lion. And what song did he have? He had If I Only Had a Brain. Did he have If I Only Had a Brain, the lion? No, because he was cowardly. Was it? I know that you're right about the characters. So Ray Bolger was the scarecrow, and Bert Lahr was the lion. That sounds better. That sounds better. Ray Bolger was the scarecrow. So Ray Bolger's song was If I Only Had a Brain, right? So then what was the lion's song? I'm trying to remember. Courage. Was that a song, Judy? It might be, for all I know. If it's not a song that I loved, I might not have clocked it. And I haven't watched that movie in ages. I'm going to have to look at that list, the soundtrack list, because they were all good songs, weren't they? Interesting. Because they were both such famous comedians from that time, weren't they? I remember Ray Bolger was in a musical after that called, I think it was called On the Aisle. And I think it had a song in it that I used to love in my cabaret days called something like If You Didn't But You Did. He was great. He was great. He was one of those great character actors, wasn't he? So much fun. This is a big rabbit hole, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, you could go right down the rabbit hole in a colossal way. No Courage for the Lion, but No Courage for the Lion. But Bert Lahr for the lion. Okay, Bert, yes, that makes more sense because now I can see his face like yawning, right, in the poppy field. That makes a lot more sense. How funny. It's so fun to be together. I love these times. I love these times. No matter how busy I am, I love these times. I feel like we are all together. I just wish we were all actually together and could see each other's faces and laugh together, but we are laughing together. I just can't hear you. But I know that I hope that you're having a good time. So these illustrations are so iconic and usable, right? Because of the date. Oh, look at little Toto. He looks like my Buttons the dog. The lion is the weirdest one for me with his with his kind of weird, what's that hairstyle called? It begins with a P. Not troubadour, pompadour, the word's on the tip of my tongue. Pompadour, is that possible? That puff of a hair, and his big wide eyes, right? It's like it's like Scooby eyes. That's always weird to me. And the size of the Dorothy character also a little bit, for me, weird, because I guess I'm just used to the movie. But these really are. But I could show you my prowess, be a lion, not a mouse. If I only had Deneuve. That's right. That's right. Oh, I remember. I got to show that to my kids. If I can get them to sit still for a little while, I can terrify them with that movie, can't I? All right, this is the next. Now I am skipping over. I'm skipping over tons of stuff because this book is rich in illustration and text. Right. So if you're loving this episode, you love this book. I already know that you love this book. Pompadour. That's it. That's it, Mom. Thank you. Um, this is another beauty. Princess Standing in a Tree. Illustration by. This is another famous person in his day. Warwick Goble, not Gobble, Goble, Goble, like Noble, like Margaret Noble, Goble and Noble, a British artist, 1862 to 1943. He was a huge magazine illustrator, and then he moved into book illustrating. So oh gosh, he's so prolific too, and there are two images of his that are in this book that I want to show you. This is Princess Standing in a Tree, 17 by 24, number 3 cut wool on linen, hooked by Helen Mar Parkin. Absolutely beautiful. This rug features several special techniques, and all the wool was dyed specifically for this project. The sky was difficult as Parkin sought to replicate the illustrator's colors by dyeing oranges and blues in 6 different spot dyes. The dress used hand-dyed velvet in the lower part, ooh, with a trapunto technique on the body. Oh, I'll stretch it out a little bit. I don't know if we're going to see that because this is a photograph of the page of the book between the neckline and the waist. We'll pull that open in case you want to try to spot the trapunto. Spot the trapunto! To create the look of a smooth torso. Interesting. The wool in this area was stitched down over a thin piece of quilt batting. So we've talked a little bit about what trapunto is and what it means. I can see Sharon saying something interesting there. I love that talk. Sharon says, I had an economics professor that taught The Wizard of Oz, in fact, a commentary on American monetary policy. I barely passed the course. That sounds heavy, but it sounds so interesting. It sounds really interesting. Why am I not able to, hang on, I'm struggling. Hang on, I'm just trying to stretch this out and it's not letting me grab. There we go, you stinker. I just want to see if we can check out that trapunto. I don't think we're going to be able to tell just because the quality of my photo is not great. Look at the shawl, is so pretty too. Helen, this is just a beautiful piece. I love the colors in it too. It's so soft and beautiful. In these fairy stories, you get so many beautiful women, and this is a period that is really sort of naturalistic, isn't it? The Victorians loved beautiful women in flowing gowns, and they also loved nature. And putting these things together was always going to be a home run. So, oh, wait a minute. I want to show you some more work of Warwick Goble. I don't know. What do you think this is? The Fisherman in the Sea? I don't think it is actually. I don't really know what this one is. If you have an idea, let me know. It's an odd one for sure. It's another Warwick Goble. You can see the lines going through here. We could talk about this at great length. Maybe we'll save this for one of our classes. Composition-wise, this is killing me, and I'm dying to talk about it for 20 minutes, but I won't. I want to show you a bunch of interesting things. This is Water Babies, which is a very famous children's book that Warwick Goble also illustrated. Lots of lovely light colors. Now, doesn't the child in this illustration remind you of, think about it, calibrate it, lock it in, get your final answer ready, Maxfield Parrish, right? I mean, also the sky, also the colors, absolutely. This is like child sitting, I can't think of which, oh God, I almost had it. Very famous image of the child sitting naked. I think it might be more than one child on. I feel like it's like a stone wall, like a white stone wall. Gosh, I know the name of that piece too. It's going to drive me nuts because it was the best-selling. Is it called Sunset or Sunrise, something like that? It was the best-selling image of that year. It was a 1920s image. This is much earlier. Maxfield Parrish was certainly inspired by Warwick Goble. You know what story this is, right? Another beautiful female character, beautiful dress. This is Beauty and the Beast. Are these hollyhocks in the distance? I'm trying to learn from our time together because so many of you are gardeners and you tell me what the flowers are. Such a beautiful illustration. I love the combination of warm and then the greens, right? You would expect to see a lot of blue in this piece, and there's really not. You've got a green sky with orange. She's got a black and orange dress with green. Lots of greens here. It's very lush. It's very mossy. It has that feeling of the forest, but it also has a very springtime feel, which makes me think, are they trying to evoke spring, like a rebirth, a change? Maybe this is the scene where he is turning back into a man, right? He's still got that horrible kind of boar's head, but beautiful illustration. This is another Warwick Goebel, and I have no idea what this is for. If you know, put it into the thread. We want to hear it. But all of these dresses are beautiful and a bit sexy, right? This is almost like that that return to the Grecian style, where you would have this kind of sheath dress with the empire, kind of Napoleon and Josephine, right? The Napoleonic dress, empire. You'd have this high waistline right under the bust, and you would actually, very thin gossamer material, and you would, they had a clothing accessory at this time because you didn't have a bra on or anything like that. It went like right here. It looked like bone, and sometimes it was like baleen or something from a vegetarian whale's mouth, and it looked almost like a popsicle stick. And sometimes it was carved or had initials like scrimshaw, and you would put it. It was like a bosom separator, right? That you would put in to your shirt to try to create definition. It was an underwire, but it was kind of in the wrong place, right? Right down the middle. I mean, that for me, that's not going to make any difference at all. But these were the kind of dresses that you would wear, and you would soak your gossamer dress in water, and you would twist it and knot it so that it wrinkled as much as possible. And then when it came time to wear it, it would be all wrinkled vertically like this, and you would put it on and look like a Greek goddess because it would cling to you. It wouldn't be wet, but it would be all wrinkled and cling to you. This costume in New England, because we used this costume in New England in the early 19th century, is called the suicide costume, because women do this, dampen their dresses, twist them up, and then get into sleigh ride situations with a fur blanket over them, but really in a stole covering their shoulders, but not really dressed and a little bit damp, and are dying of pneumonia and all kinds of cold type diseases. It's a real thing. It's part of fashion history. This is one of the few fairy stories. I don't know which one this is, but it has fairies in it. If you know this one, let me know, because it is really, really charming. It's obviously a child, some kind of an orphan situation, and the fairies have adopted the child. But I think it's a beautiful illustration. I love the diagonal pull of it with the floorboards. This is still Warwick Goebel. He is really extraordinary. This has got to be the Frog Prince, right? Or the Princess in the... It's called the Frog Prince, isn't it? I think this is another Hans Christian Andersen. But yeah, here she is making her way through the woods. She looks very furtive. And it looks like a lovely sort of evening scene, doesn't it? That purpley blue that's creeping in, that sort of matches her dress. These are paintings, right? These are paintings. These are not in the book. So, hey, up for grabs. Good times. And this is the one that we were looking at in the book. So look at the original illustration by Goebel, and then come here again and look here. I actually like this one better again. It's just so much richer, isn't it? It's so rich. I mean, the original illustrations are absolutely beautiful. But man, when you add fabric to anything, right, it's like adding garlic. It's going to be a home run. So absolutely beautiful. And again, this is Helen Mar Parkin. This is the second Goebel that is in the book. I'm sorry, my image is not that great. This one is hooked by Cindy Duade, D-U-A-D-E. The Star Lovers, illustration by Warwick Goebel, 21.5 by 15, number 3 cut also in wool, number 4 through 5 cut silk, beads and yarn on linen. Absolutely, absolutely stunning. I like the way Cindy Duade signs her name, because it's like a C you see in the bottom right, and it makes a circle with a line through it because the D is like the second half of it. That's so clever. Let me just hold this up for you just in case this is much better. At night here too, I just feel like it's a bit crisper, but it's just such a beautiful, look at the way the lantern is glowing. This is the wool, right? This is the hooked rug. It's absolutely so beautiful. Cindy, this is really, really beautiful. And I have the original of this too, so let me show that to you, because that might mean something to you. So again, right, I just feel like the hooked one is even better. I mean, it's just, they're both beautiful, but look at the lantern again glowing. Isn't that remarkable? colors too, right? We've got like the Van Gogh palette here, and many, many birds again. So I don't know what story this is. The Star Lovers, maybe that is the story. Um, the excerpt read, Goebel's love of Asian art and Asian fairy tales sparkles in this lovely picture. Dwayne dyed an old silk blouse for the weaving maiden's kimono and used yarn for her hair. Some background color was dipped into the lantern color to achieve the glow effect. A swatch of 10 different values of spot dyes was used for the Milky Way, the most challenging part of this piece. Tiny star-shaped beads were sewn into the backing, then a dark shadow hooked around them. Whoa. Let me just stretch. Oh, see, my picture's so bad. Let me show you on here. The kimono in itself, knowing that it was a dyed blouse, is so pretty. Okay, spam risk. Why am I getting a spam risk call at like 9 o'clock at night? Jerks. See if I can come into focus. You see the colors in the kimono? Isn't that amazing? I don't know this story at all. I have a huge gap in my knowledge when it comes to Asian fairy tales. I have books on Asian fairy tales, but I haven't had a chance to read them yet. I started picking up books of fairy tales from all different cultures when I started doing the Design Light class. So sooner or later we'll come to lots of different cultures. Maybe we'll do an all international chapter too and learn about some fairy tales that are not like Anglo or American or North American, right? Although there are some great Native American fairy tales out there, like how Possum brought fire to the world by lighting, going to the humans and lighting his little tail on fire, and then running back to where the humans were and letting them share the fire and build a campfire and eat and survive. And forever after, his little tail was bald. Right? There are great stories like that in this culture too. So we'll have to think about what we want to do. We've got lots of choices. Now, I am actually on schedule, believe it or not, even with all of that mouth running. Let's see what the next piece is. That was that. Now we're coming to Peter Rabbit. So, and we aren't done with this book. We're going to look at this book again on Monday. Beatrix Potter, not to be confused with Thornton Burgess, because Thornton Burgess was an American who also had a Peter Rabbit, right, around the same time, a little bit later. But I don't think he was aware of this Peter Rabbit in England. Is the baby in the cradle a changeling? Ooh, Susan, that gave me the super shivers, but I think you might be right. Oops, wait a minute. Why am I in gallery night? Sorry about that. Hold on, Peter. I want to come back here. Wait a minute. Hold on. I got to check this out now. That word changingly just triggered something in my head too. It sounded really right. Let me see. Let me stretch this out a little bit. I know we'll probably figure this out before. I wonder. Ooh, interesting. The Changeling. Is that the title of the story, or are you thinking of a specific story called The Changeling? Not obviously the movie, but or because I feel like the idea of a changeling is one of these tropes that goes through a lot of fairy stories, and I can't name one in particular without doing some research that would include a changeling. Although I know the word changeling from fairy tales. It's one of those, right, horse and cart things. Cass says, I wonder this is about the two lovers who meet once a year over the Milky Way. Well, Kaz, you would have more expertise on this because you are definitely more up on Asian fairy tales than I would be, right? So whatever your instinct is probably right. Interesting. I mean, it certainly sounds like we've got the elements there. Maybe the woman that's well-dressed in her kimono is on her way to meet the lover, right? Because this is specifically the Milky Way, it said in the background. Interesting, isn't it? I would love to know. Let me just check that chapter and see if it... Yeah, it doesn't say. It doesn't say. It just says... It says the Star Lovers. Maybe the Star Lovers is the name of the story. I feel it's Sleeping Beauty, isn't it? Oh! Okay, hang on. I wonder if... Oh. Okay. Now, is Sleeping Beauty brought up by fairies? I mean, because I know she's an orphan, right? So this is not a... I thought she had an evil step parent. I mean, I suppose I don't know. We need to research this, right? Because this is... it could be, Melissa. It could be. Fairies are changelings. They take on a human form, steal human babies, and leave... Oh, wow, that's disturbing. So Andrew says the fairies are the changelings. They take on human form, they steal human babies, and leave changeling babies behind. Okay, I thought a changeling was something that turned into like a different adult thing, like a different form. I think I'm thinking of a shapeshifter. Shame on me. Interesting and really disturbing. Um, Melanie says, I did too, Lisa. The king and queen give the baby to the fairies to be raised. Oh, you guys are great. You are good. I know who I'm calling if I'm on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and I get a fairy tale question. Susan says, story or old tale, golden haired babies were stolen by elves and fairies. I guess because of their golden hair, right? And then, isn't there at least one fairy tale? Is it, what's the one where they're spinning the golden hair? That's not Rumpelstiltskin, is it? It is. It is Rumpelstiltskin. And I guess they're spinning it because it's golden hair. So these are more tropes. This is what I'm talking about. All of these tropes, there is, it's like it is now, isn't it? There are certain things that trigger real specific ideas, and we're supposed to know the subtext because we live in our culture and it's part of popular culture. We're supposed to know the subtext. But some of these have gotten so far away from us timeline wise, it's hard to remember all the details of how they work. I'm very happy to be brought up to speed on the changeling. That is really going to cause some nightmares tonight. It's going to be a sleeping pill night for me. Interesting story. And I like the thing about the gold hair, too. See, if you were going to do a fairy tale rug, there would be so much to think about because you could really dive deep with all these conversations that we're having tonight and, you know, be thinking of all these aspects of it, right? Like the Technicolor black and white Wizard of Oz. That's a great sort of trick, right? That's a great device to that piece. There's so many things that you could put into your pieces. Um, the more you think and the more you brainstorm and snowball and research and look, there'd be so many interesting things to think about. Judy says Rumpelstiltskin was the straw into gold. Okay, that was not hair. That was straw into gold. Yep. Melissa says I'm going by the Sylvia Plath poem. She references the protective fairies. Well, I'm sure you're right on with that because she was always quite right on, except that very last day. Um, Interesting. I feel like I have a lot of stuff to research, and this is not the weekend for it, but this is really exciting. Don't walk into a fairy ring. I have heard that one. The fairies lie in wait and take you into their world. I wonder if they kidnapped this child. It sounds like they did. But at the same time, it sounds like they're treating him right, right? So that maybe we better not finish that line of conversation. Love the rabbit hole. I do too. I love the rabbit. You all know, so we all know different things, and a lot of the same things too, of course. But so much fun. This is now turning into not my favorite. So let me come back. Hang on. Wait a minute. I want to speed up a little bit because I have a challenge for you at the end. Hang on. All right. So I think that is the Star Lovers. I think that sounds like it makes sense. If there is a story called the Star Lovers, then that would make sense. Ryan, I'll see you soon. Congrats on that punch piece. Yeah, they kidnap me. They can kidnap me anytime, Sharon. They're gonna put you in the lap of luxury and rock you in a giant cradle. Wouldn't that be fantastic with a beautiful quilt draped over you? God, I want to sign up for that too. That sounds great. So fun, the rabbit hole. And Melanie says, I would love to be the pro. You all want to be the person that they abduct. This is so funny. This is the basis for a good story rug, too. Well, this is the last rug that we're going to look at today, but it's not. It's going to be a rabbit hole conversation that we end on. For me, Beatrix Potter doesn't fall into the category of a fairy tale at all, but you know she is a British writer. I'm going to show you a photo of her, 1866 to 1943. She is a children's book story writer, but I wouldn't call her stories fairy tales because they are not. They're not folks. They are not folk stories for the folks, right? They are specifically for children. So that's a little bit different because fairy tales typically are originally not made for children. They are much older stories. But you know, who cares, right? Who cares? But we are all familiar, I'm sure, with Beatrix Potter and with all of these characters. This is the most famous of the Beatrix Potter's characters. It's Peter Rabbit, of course, and I'm sure you recognize him. So I have a little game. Hang on just a second. I'm just going to take a little sip. The original cottage core, absolutely. Judy, Absolutely. And also, wait a minute, Tasha Tudor, right? Tasha Tudor is another one that even more so for me. I just love her illustrations. Um, like just the cooking, the recipes, the quaint, very small scale housekeeping. Talk about tiny house culture, right? The gardening, all of that. Beatrix Potter and Tasha Tudor for me are like just super, super, super impossibly quaint, right? Just really puts you in that really Anglophile type of mood. I think Tasha Tudor was American though, wasn't she? Wasn't she from New England? Anyway, we're talking rabbit hole, ADHD. We're talking about Beatrix Potter, and this is Beatrix Potter on the left. There have been recent movies that are wonderful, and certainly her characters are very familiar. When you look at Peter Rabbit, like biting on that rabbit, doesn't it seem like, even if it's been like 20, 30, 40 years or more, doesn't it seem like you just saw that image like yesterday? I mean, I know it, you do see it on mugs and stuff like that, but a lot of her images, the Tailor of Gloucester, right? I mean, this, I know I haven't seen this for a long time, and I feel like I just saw it. They are so beautiful. They are so detail oriented. So many of her books, so much fun, sweet little characters. Be careful with copyright because she died in 1943. British copyright is different than American copyright. You would really want to look and check the character in the book that you're pulling from because she died in the 1940s, right? So much later. And Melanie says, I used to read much later than the 20s where things are copyright free. Melanie says, I used to read the mysteries with Beatrix Potter as the main character. Oh, hold on. What do you mean they're like, are they like fiction books? Like, are they mysteries for grown-ups to read that have Beatrix Potter as like an imaginary sleuth? Because if so, I have not heard this yet, and I would need to know. I would definitely need to know because I would enjoy that immensely. So while I'm waiting for that cliffhanger, because I am dying to know about the mysteries, let's play a game. Now, let me ask you this. When I pull up a picture, can you see what the title of the picture is? You can't, can you? So Andrea's saying still copyrighted. So that's done and dusted, right? So there must be some kind of permission for this. Um, anyway, you can't see the titles to my slides, right? Because we're about to play. We're all intrigued. Yes, fiction, Melanie says. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up too. Wait a minute. I'm going to take a picture of that because mysteries are my favorite. And I've read a lot about Beatrix Potter. Love, love, love. Love that whole Lake District. All right, interesting. We're all intrigued. Now, I'm going to assume that you can't see the cheaty peaty words that I wrote. And I'm going to show you a series of Beatrix Potter characters, and you name them. And this is how we go out tonight. I've got a handful of characters, and you tell me, for example, let me get rid of this one. Hang on. We know this is from the book The Tailor of Gloucester, but can you identify this character? Do, 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 do. I better not because I'll get a copyright slap on this video. I'm going to have a little sip while you figure out who this character is. No Googling. And I'm going to, because there's a huge delay for us, I'm probably going to tell you before anybody has a chance to type it. So, this character is Benjamin Bunny. Did you get it? Well, know if you got it because the delay is huge with these videos, with these live streams. So, if you got it, congratulations. And if not, it's just fun to guess, isn't it? So here comes character number 2. Can you identify this Beatrix Potter character? Dude, I can't help it. I can't help it, but I better not. Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you that Peter Rabbit illustration by Beatrix Potter, 11 by 14 and a half, number 3 and number 4 cut wool on linen, was hooked by Sherry Matz, M-A-T-Z. Absolutely beautiful, Sherry. It got us going. It certainly got us going, and we loved your Peter Rabbit. Melissa says, Susan Wittig, Albert, The Cottage Tales of Beatrix Potter. I have them. Well, Melissa, if you have them, we have exactly the same taste, and we have recently figured that out. And if you like them, I'm going to like them too. There's like no question about that at all in my mind. So this character, I'm wondering if anyone's playing along here, is Squirrel Nutkin. You remember Squirrel Nutkin. But you remember this character. Another Beatrix Potter character. I think what this character is doing has some kind of bearing on its name. Do you remember this guy from those old stories? This is a great exercise for me because I get to take some sips. Well, maybe you're guessing. No takers, huh? Jeremy Fisher. Jeremy Fisher. If you had the whole set, there was a lot of characters, huh? They're only going to get harder, I have to say. How about this one? You remember who this character is? This is Tom Kitten. Oh gosh, he's so cute. He really is so cute, isn't he? How about this one? I'm going to be very careful when I say her name. Maybe that's a clue. Little cutie. They look so realistic, don't they? Little sweethearts. This is Mrs. Tittlemouse. Mrs. I'm not going to say it again just in case. And how about how about this character? You almost had Tom Kitten. He was so cute, Judy. How about this character? This is maybe an easy one. So cute. They are so cute. This is the second to last. So we are actually making great time with this episode. I am amazed. We went down a lot of rabbit holes. Yes, Andrea, Jemima Puddle Duck. Well done. Well played. And here is your last image of the night. Anybody recognize this little sweetheart? This has got to be a hedgehog, right? That's not a clue. It's not a clue at all, actually. So cute. Doing the laundry. Becky got it too. You loved her. These are hard. I have to say I'm way more familiar with the Thornton Burgess characters than the Beatrix Potter, just because of the Cape Cod connection for me. This is Mrs. Tiggywinkle. So that was the hardest one I had for you, Allie. Evening. Woo, better. Allie, we're about to log off, though, and we just had, spoiler alert, at the end of the show, we just had a trivia challenge, Beatrix Potter, because we looked at our last image. Let me show you from the book. I'd probably find it faster. And we will be back again, of course. It was Beatrix Potter, hooked by Sherry Matz, or Matz. So cute. Billy Badger. No, that's a good guess, though. Ooh, that was a good guess. Good job, Andrea. You're good. Well, you are British, right? So you've had a lot of the Potter over the years, right? Over the years. What an amazing stroll down memory lane. Thanks, Kirsten. Thanks. It was fun. It was really fun for me, too. I almost lost my voice. I never got my voice back completely, as you can probably tell. But I still feel like singing and being stupid all the time. So that's how I'll use it until it comes back completely. So cute, Allie, right? So we were looking at this book, and we will continue looking at this book on Monday. Hooking Fairy Tales, and this is by Robin Rennie. It's absolutely stellar, as you've seen, right? It's just been an absolutely gorgeous book. It's color everywhere, and it's so much text, so much fun. It's a great book to dig into. So we will come back to that, and I am not showing a fraction of it. But let's play again on Monday and look at the rest of the slides I had, because some of my favorite slides are at the end of the book that we haven't even talked about or looked at yet ever. So thank you, Mom. Thumbs up. Patreon supporters, thank you so much for your support, particularly right now when things are so crazy. Karen, if you are logged on, as soon as I log off, I'm looking for the piece that I misplaced, that is not lost, that is misplaced. I am on it. It is going to be a busy weekend for me here. I've got a to-do list that is crazy, but I will certainly be with you live on Sunday when we are heading into the show. And I'll bring you as much footage as I can without being annoying to people who are arriving. And then I will be back with you on Monday for coffee time while we continue looking at Robin's book, Hooking Fairy Tales, put out by Rug Hooking Magazine. And I will look forward to that immensely because the slides are already in our thing for us for part 2. And then I will be live and then Tuesday, Kirsten will be hosting, as always, the live hook-in from 10:30 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 10:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. We're not that crazy at this point. And fun show down the rabbit hole, really down the rabbit hole. I love our Friday nights. Oh yeah, do the bell. Tap the bell. Tap. That's what I'm supposed to say. Tap the bell if you want notifications. Because some people were writing, "How do I log on?" Tap the bell. That's how you know that I'll be live, and you know when I'm live. But if you tap the bell and I do something rogue, like come on live from the show, you will be notified immediately. So tap the bell, please. And otherwise, I will see you Sunday. I will see you Monday. Kirsten will see you on Tuesday for the live hook-in. I will be back with you Wednesday live at the Rug Show. And I'll be back to you next Friday night for gallery night. So be sure that you're sending me um, your images for gallery night next Friday night. We'll be looking at your work next Friday night. Lots in between. Happy weekend, everybody. I will see you before